Hey guys, tonight we slip into a mist-shrouded forest, where even the moss seems to whisper. You're moving slow, careful not to trip on gnarled roots or startle whatever just snapped a twig off to your left. There's a heaviness in the air, not fear exactly, more like awe, or the weight of too many stories layered on top of each other like fallen leaves. You're deep in Iron Age Europe now, where the world smells like wet bark and burnt herbs, and the only map that matters is the one you draw in your head. Somewhere nearby, a druid has been here, and what they carried might just change the way you see the past. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging across a clearing now, the trees parting just enough to let the pale sky peer through. Your boots, okay, your imaginary boots, sink slightly into damp earth. It smells like something old is watching you. There's no threat here, not really. Just the sense that everything around you remembers more than it lets on. Near the center of the clearing, you spotted a stone altar, weather-worn and covered in ivy. And lying next to it, half tucked beneath a cloak of animal hide, is the pouch. The druid's pouch. You reach down, fingers brushing rough leather softened by years of use. It's not large, just enough to tie at the hip or tuck beneath robes, but it's heavy in your palm, denser than it looks. You undo the cord. The knot resists you, just a little, as if it remembers being tied by someone who meant it. You work slowly, respecting whatever invisible barrier your curiosity is about to breach. The pouch opens, and you stare inside. The first thing you see isn't an object, it's a smell. Earthy, sharp, tinged with something green, like crushed pine needles and fire smoke. Then you glimpse the shapes, bundled herbs, bits of carved wood, tiny metallic glints, and something disturbingly fuzzy. Each item is tucked in like a secret, as if the pouch is less a container and more a library. You take a breath. You start pulling things out. A sprig of dried mistletoe, tied with sinew. Not holiday cheer mistletoe, this is sacred parasite mistletoe. Druids harvested it ritually, often from oak trees, using golden sickles during certain lunar phases. Sounds dramatic, but hey, if your whole job is being mystical, you might as well commit to the bit. They believed it held healing power, fertility energy, maybe even the key to preventing death, though judging by how long they've been dead, it might not have been a foolproof plan. Next to it, a brittle root twisted into a near-perfect spiral. Possibly mandrake, though it's too small to scream. Mandrake roots were thought to resemble human forms, and yes, they had that reputation of shrieking when pulled from the ground. Fringe legend? Maybe. But some Roman accounts claim druids used dogs to harvest the roots from a distance, so either they were extra cautious, or extra dramatic. Tucked beneath that, you find a folded scrap of cloth wrapped around something weighty. You unravel it to reveal a lump of iron ore, cool to the touch. That's not just geology, it's symbolism. Iron resisted magical influence, supposedly, and was often kept close to ground spells or ward off otherworldly interference. Of course, historians still argue whether druids themselves used iron often, or whether this is something adapted from later traditions muddled by Roman chroniclers. As you dig further, one thing becomes clear: this isn't a practical toolkit. It's a portable altar, a spell kit, a spiritual survival guide. You're not holding possessions so much as pieces of a worldview. Everything in this pouch has meaning, and probably more than one. Some of it is literal. Some of it's symbolic. And some of it? Honestly, you think they just like the vibe. Because let's face it, even ancient mystics probably had moments of, it looks cool, toss it in. There's something endearing about that. Something human. This wasn't just ceremonial, this was daily life. You can almost picture it, a druid kneeling in the early morning, pouch open beside them, fingers tracing familiar objects while breath clouds the air. Preparing for a healing, a blessing, a debate, or just another long walk through the woods with nothing but bird calls and the occasional existential crisis. And just when you think you've seen it all, your fingers brush against the pouch lining and feel a corner. A compartment. A hidden space stitched into the leather itself. You slide your fingers in, and something slides back. It's a tiny charm, carved from bone, painted with something reddish-brown. The paint hasn't flaked at all, which is slightly unnerving. It looks like a face, but not quite a human one. You blink, and for a moment, It looks like it blinked too. You tuck it back in. Gently. The pouch isn't empty yet. Not by a long shot. But you sit back for a second, letting the air settle. The clearing hasn't changed, but you have. Just a little. Like you borrowed someone else's eyes for a moment and saw how different the world looks when every twig and pebble means something. This is just the beginning. The pouch holds more. And so does the past. Your fingers hover over the open pouch like you're about to pick a card in a very high-stakes magic trick. This isn't just rummaging anymore, it's a quiet negotiation between curiosity and caution. You reach back in, and this time, what comes out makes your nose wrinkle before your eyes even focus. Herbs. Dried, crushed, bundled. Some sweet, some sharp, and at least one that smells like it's mad at you. You fan a few sprigs in your hand. Mugwort, there it is, unmistakable with its silvery fuzz and sharp, resinous scent. If you've ever had a dream that felt more real than waking life, mugwort might have been involved. Druids believed it opened the gates of perception, and modern herbalists still use it for lucid dreaming and spiritual rituals. It's the ancient version of opening too many tabs in your brain and forgetting which one has music playing. Next to it, mistletoe again, but this time fresh. Greener. Sticky with sap and dangerously charming. You remember how sacred it was in Section 1, but this sample looks different. Younger. Maybe even plucked in haste. There's debate among historians whether Druids harvested it only ritually or if they also used it day to day. What we do know. Mistletoe is toxic in the wrong dose. So basically, sacred plant, yes. Also potential death salad. You sift further and spot something shriveled, red, and mushroom-shaped. It's fuzzy. Not cute fuzzy. Danger fuzzy. Probably fly agaric, the red and white mushroom you've seen in fairy tales and Super Mario. This little guy has a complicated reputation, part poison, part Vision Quest starter pack. Siberian shamans used it, but Celtic Druids? Well, historians still argue whether they consumed it ritually or just understood its power and packed it for intimidation purposes. Let's pause for a moment. You're sitting in a field, holding a poisonous mushroom and a sprig of psychoactive herb, wondering if your new hobby counts as recreational archaeology. Spoiler, it does not. But it is starting to feel like the pouch wasn't just spiritual, it was pharmacological. A mobile medicine chest, one part apothecary, one part psychedelic survival kit. Among the herbs, you find bundles tied with fiber string. One contains crushed yarrow, used to stop bleeding. Another smells like fennel, possibly for digestion. And one, surprisingly, is chamomile. That's right, even a mystical druid needed help winding down after a long day of prognosticating and dramatic stick-waving. Now here's the fun twist, some of these herbs aren't native to the immediate Celtic homelands. Which means trade, or travel, or just really ambitious gardening. There's growing evidence druids weren't just forest loners, they were connected, informed, maybe even fashionably eclectic. Historians argue about just how cosmopolitan they were, but the fact remains, their pouches included plants from far-flung places. That means some of these items crossed land and sea before they ended up nestled against a druid's hip. But not everything in this leafy collection was for healing or tripping through spirit realms. One dark bundle is so pungent you flinch. It smells like rotten pepper had an angry baby. Could be henbane. It was used for anesthesia, yes, but also as a curse component. You imagine a druid using it for darker rituals, maybe to hex a rival, or more plausibly, to scare off a Roman tax collector. Either way, this isn't bedtime tea stuff. A flat stone rests beneath the herbs, stained black in the center. Burn mark? Possibly. You run your thumb over the surface and feel a grainy residue. It crumbles slightly. Charcoal, maybe? Or powdered plant matter from old smoke rituals. Druids likely didn't carry full cauldrons with them, but burning herbs in small doses on portable stones or shells? Very possible. Miniature incense burners from antiquity have been found, though whether the Celts used them is still hotly debated. And then, you feel it. Not in your hand, but in your head. A tingling. A warmth behind your eyes. Is it just the herbs? The storytelling? Or maybe the pouch is sharing something with you. You glance around the glade. Everything is still. But the air feels thicker, charged. Like whatever was once conjured here is stirring again. Okay, deep breath. Let's recalibrate. You pack the herbs back in. Gently. Like you're tucking old friends into bed. You don't need them following you home. The final item you pull from the herbal section is unexpected, a hollowed-out gourd, sealed with wax. You shake it gently and hear a slosh. Could be oil. Could be potion. Could be ancient salad dressing. You're not opening it to find out. But it reminds you, this pouch wasn't just for dried things. Liquids had their place too. Maybe for anointing, maybe for burns, maybe to pour over an offering stone while whispering things no one's allowed to write down. So what's the takeaway from all this foliage and fungi? You're not just holding plants. You're holding intention. Every root was selected for a reason. Every leaf carried a possibility. In a world without modern medicine or lab results, knowledge of herbs was power. Literal life or death power. And Druids didn't just study it, they wore it, carried it, became it. And somehow, as you close the pouch again and the herbal smells fade, you get the sense that this was just the light stuff. The deeper magic, the weirder stuff, is still waiting at the bottom. You tip the pouch forward, letting the fabric slump open like the pages of a worn book, and now it's time for the grittier cargo. Out comes the crunch, the dry rattle of things that once had marrow, maybe names. Bones. Teeth. Tiny skulls. You freeze for a second, because okay, that's not what you expected after the lavender and mushroom buffet. In your palm now lies a small jawbone, probably animal. Probably. Smooth from years of handling, it's been drilled through the hinge, likely worn on a string. A charm? A warning? A memory? Historians still argue whether bones were tokens of past healings, trophies from animal sacrifices, or symbolic totems, like, I carry fox spirit with me, instead of I carry part of my lunch. Nestled beside it is a row of teeth, 5, tied with a thin leather cord. They're not human. Not exactly. Sharp and small, likely from a weasel or badger. You briefly wonder how much dental flossing was happening back then. Spoiler, none. But it hits you that this collection isn't about biology. It's about power. Protection. Maybe intimidation. You imagine a druid pulling these out mid-ritual, rattling them like wind chimes of the underworld. Then you spot the skull. Tiny. Delicate. Possibly bird. Possibly reptile. Possibly not either. It's been painted with ochre and scratched with patterns. Swirls, spirals, maybe a crude constellation. Its hollow sockets seem to look past you. Like it knows something. You put it down, because this is bedtime, not the Blair Witch Project, Druid Edition. Bones have always held meaning. They're not just remains, they're relics. In Celtic belief, the line between life and death was less a wall and more of a gauzy curtain. Bones were keys, reminders of ancestors, animal spirits, or the thin spaces where dreams touched daylight. Carrying them wasn't grotesque. It was intimate, like a whispered secret made solid. And it wasn't just bone. There are fragments that feel more ornamental. A carved femur sliver, dyed black with soot, etched with marks that might be Ogham script, the early Celtic writing system that looks like slashes on a stick. Or a tally. Or a very intense game of druidic tic-tac-toe. Some scholars say Ogham was reserved for elite communication, others think it was a secret language to record spells and stories. And here you are, holding a literal bone message. One item surprises you, a flat piece of turtle shell. But, there weren't turtles in Celtic Europe, right? Well, turns out there were rare finds, possibly imported, possibly just unlucky forest reptiles. Or maybe it's not turtle shell at all. Historians still debate whether some of these curved fragments are from native species, or trade routes that stretched farther than we think. One theory even suggests druids carried foreign animal bones to show spiritual mastery over lands they never visited. Like a naturalist's Instagram, but make it spooky. You turn over a tooth that's been melted in lead. That's unusual. Lead wasn't widely used in decorative Celtic work, it's heavy, toxic, and moody. But here, it frames a large molar, almost certainly from a bear. Did it belong to a druid? A hunted beast? A spirit guide? Maybe all three. Lead might have been chosen not in spite of its poison, but because of it. Like some dark alchemy, this tooth binds the strength of the bear and the danger of the earth. Dramatic? Yes. Effective? Who knows, but it feels serious. Suddenly, you feel how delicate all this is. Not the bones, those are weirdly durable. But the ritual, the mindset, the understanding that even something as grim as a skull could bring safety, or clarity, or guidance. That death wasn't final. Just another layer of the story. And not everything here is animal. Tucked in a pouch within the pouch, because of course there's a pouchception situation happening, you find something thin and brittle, a piece of what might be human rib. It's engraved, not with runes, but with tiny dots and lines, forming a pattern you can't decipher but feels intentional. Could it be a relic of a fallen mentor? A physical prayer? A sliver of someone so revered they were literally carried around after death? Here's where it gets especially murky. Ancient sources, many of them Roman and none of them super chill, claimed Druids practiced human sacrifice. They described blood rites, effigies, even wicker men. But modern scholars argue fiercely over whether these were real, exaggerated propaganda, or complete Roman fan fiction. You hold this rib piece and wonder, ritual tool, remembrance token, or just a weird coincidence? You'll never know. And maybe you're not supposed to. At the very bottom of the bone section lies a surprising object, a pouch made of stitched rabbit hide, soft and delicate, containing nothing but dust. You open it carefully, and the wind picks up just slightly. Coincidence, probably. But the dust? It's pale, gritty, bone dust, ground intentionally. Used, perhaps, to mix into paint or draw symbols during rites. In some Celtic traditions, ashes of the dead were kept for seasonal rituals, invoking wisdom during solstices or turning points. The body, still helping long after it was done walking around. You close the pouch slowly. The druid who carried this wasn't a collector. They were a keeper, a guardian of small deaths, big meanings, and invisible connections. And somehow, even through time, you feel the weight of that. So now you know. This wasn't just a bag of weird old bones. It was a miniature shrine. A spell in motion. And just wait till you see what's under the bones. You shake out your hand, brushing off the imaginary bone dust that definitely doesn't want to come off. The pouch, half emptied, still holds more weight than seems physically possible, like a magician's top hat, but with fewer rabbits and more cosmic symbolism. You reach in again. And now, your fingers touch something smooth, cold, round. You pull it into the light and see a cluster of stones. Some are dull, some glint with a glimmer just beneath the surface. Each fits in the palm of your hand, carefully chosen, not just grabbed from the nearest stream like a bored toddler. These are sacred stones, and they were meant to be carried. The first is quartz, milky white and slightly translucent. It hums under your skin, though maybe that's just your blood pressure reacting to the caffeine you swore you didn't drink this late. Quartz was believed to amplify energy, to help connect a druid with spirit realms or intensify rituals. It was the booster signal of the ancient world. Found across Europe, often buried in ritual sites or positioned atop altars, quartz wasn't decoration. It was an interface. A way to dial the gods. Next to it is a black stone with silvery flecks, possibly hematite, possibly something more obscure. When polished, it shines like a still pond at midnight. Druids may have used it for grounding energy or as a scrying tool, like a mini mirror into whatever waited on the other side. Historians still argue whether such stones were used for literal fortune-telling or more abstract reflection, but either way, they carried a sense of looking deeper. And no offense to modern crystals, but this one looks like it knows things. Another stone is oddly shaped, almost square, with a single hole worn through the center. Naturally made by water, not drilled. This is a hag stone, or adder stone. These were believed to ward off curses and fey mischief, and to see through illusions. Some Celts hung them around their necks. Others tucked them in sleeping spaces to prevent nightmares. You hold it up, peering through the hole. For a second, the world shifts, then shifts back. You blink. That's fine. That's probably fine. You find a small pouch within the main pouch. Again, layers, always layers, filled with smaller stones, almost bead-size. Lapis lazuli? Unlikely, too exotic for these parts. But the blue veins running through them hint at mineral trade routes that reached farther than textbooks suggest. Whether they were gifted, scavenged, or brought home from some vision quest, these stones weren't casual additions. They were talismans, tools, and tokens of connection. You start noticing the shapes. Not just random pebbles, but carved ones, into crescents, spirals, and one shaped eerily like a tiny eye. That one you put down immediately because it feels like it's still blinking. The crescent is comforting, though. Celts were moon watchers, and many of their ceremonies followed lunar cycles. A stone carved like a moon could represent more than timing. It might signify transformation, growth, or cycles of life and death. Or maybe it was just a moon-shaped worry stone. You rub it between your fingers anyway. It helps. There's a circular slate marked with a spiral engraving. Not etched deep, just enough to catch dust and light. The Celtic spiral symbol is older than the Druids themselves. It represents growth, motion, cosmic energy. And standing there in your imaginary clearing, holding this ancient doodle in your hand, you feel its pull. One line, turning on itself forever, suggesting that time isn't a straight road. It's a coil. You're in it. We all are. You find another stone, red this time, and smooth as glass. Could be jasper. Red stones were believed to represent blood, vitality, and the earth's heat. The Celts honored the land like a living thing, offering her stones, returning pieces of themselves, sometimes quite literally. You imagine a druid kneeling at a stream, pressing this red stone to their forehead, whispering to soil and sky. One peculiar item rests at the bottom, a perfectly flat, black stone with a notch along one edge. Unlike the others, this doesn't feel spiritual. It feels practical. A whetstone, perhaps. Something used to sharpen blades, or maybe to etch other stones. That blend of the mystical and the mundane is kind of comforting. Like yes, you're communing with spirits, but also, you might need to sharpen your knife. Priorities. But here's where it gets weird. Weirder. One of the stones is warm. It shouldn't be. Everything else has that cool, night air feel. But this one, small, golden brown, shaped like a tooth, pulses faintly in your hand. You hold it longer. Still warm. Still odd. Historians argue whether such objects were enchanted, or if natural magnetism played a role in ritual stones. But you're starting to think that maybe science doesn't explain everything. Not here. You pack the stones back, but not before noticing that many were stored wrapped in leaves. Carefully chosen, dried leaves. Some even labeled with tiny dots scratched into birch bark. There was a method here. A system. A meaning to the madness. These stones weren't just carried for their looks. They were portals. Passwords. Promises. As the last stone slides back into the pouch, you feel it. A subtle weight shift. Like the pouch acknowledges your visit. As if you've been measured and, maybe, approved. But you're not done. Because tucked underneath the stones, almost buried, is something softer. Feathers. You pause, fingers brushing what feels like the lightest thing in the world. Feathers. Soft, hollow, deceptively fragile, until you remember that they once lifted entire creatures into the air. You lift one slowly. It's gray at the base, darkening to black at the tip, with a subtle blue shimmer when the light hits just right. Crow. Maybe raven. Which is a big deal, because in Celtic mythology, ravens aren't just birds, they're omens, messengers, sometimes harbingers of fate itself. You turn the feather in your hand and feel something intentional. This isn't a random nature find. It was selected, preserved, probably even named. You can almost hear the flap of wings overhead. You look up instinctively. Nothing. But the forest feels quieter now. You dig again and find more eagle feather, hawk, maybe owl. Each bundled separately, tied with sinew or wrapped in parchment soft bark. Druids may have believed feathers carried the essence of the bird, strength, sight, cunning. Some could represent flight of thought, visions, dreams, prophecy. Others may have been used in rituals where smoke was fanned with wings or breath was guided like wind over a hillside. Some feathers are worn down, frayed edges. You get the sense they were used, not just carried. Maybe waved over the sick, maybe brushed across an altar, maybe to tickle a sleeping initiate and see if they'd flinch. Hey, even druids had to keep things interesting. Feathers weren't alone. Tangled with them is fur. A tuft of dark brown hair, coarse, like boar bristle. You pull it free and find it's tied at one end with a braided red thread. No random souvenir. This was symbolic. Maybe protection. Maybe power. The Celts saw animals as more than companions or food. They were teachers, spirits, even gods in disguise. A lock of fur could mean invoking strength, channeling speed, or honoring a fallen companion. And then there are claws. One sharp, curved claw, dark as obsidian. Possibly bird, possibly fox, possibly something no longer listed in biology textbooks. You hold it up, feel its weight. It's light, but it feels serious. There are stories of druids transforming into animals, or at least being spiritually linked. Shape-shifting wasn't just fantasy, it was metaphor. When you carried a claw, you weren't just honoring the animal. You were saying, part of me is still this. A little deeper and you find a string of what looks like whiskers. Yes, whiskers. White, stiff, fine as threads. Maybe from a cat. Maybe from a stoat or otter. Bound together at one end with green thread. This one's a mystery. Historians still argue whether such bundles were for scent, sensory charm, or symbolic guidance, like antennae pointing the soul in the right direction. But the vibe? Oddly serene. Like this one's just here to know. Then you hit something completely unexpected. A wing. A full, mummified bird wing, folded tight and bound in leather wrap. It's old. Very old. The feathers are fragile but intact, preserved as if someone couldn't bear to let it go. It's not for show. It's for ceremony. You imagine it laid across a chest in silent prayer, or passed over the heads of initiates like a shadowy benediction. You look around. The wind picks up. You swear you hear a faint rustle above, but no leaves move. Okay, back to the pouch. Tucked into one corner is a clawed paw. Not a full one, just the tips, dried and stitched into a charm. This isn't grotesque. It's reverent. Like a reminder that life doesn't vanish when the body does. In some Celtic regions, foxes were considered sacred guides, clever, quiet, always watching. A fox paw might have symbolized the ability to walk unseen, or navigate dream space undetected. You slide it back gently. Whatever journey it was part of, it deserves rest. Another bundle contains feathers woven into a tiny fan. A ritual tool, most likely. Used to stir incense smoke or brush across objects being cleansed. The base is wrapped with leather and marked with 3 short dashes, maybe a clan symbol, maybe the druid's personal mark, or maybe just ancient shorthand for don't touch. But, of course, you did. You find one more thing tucked in with the feathers and fur. A small pouch filled with powder, soft, white, and faintly fragrant. Crushed eggshell? Ground bone? Flower pollen? It's hard to say. But one sniff and you're back to memories that aren't yours. Hills you've never walked. Rites you've never seen. Sometimes, memory doesn't belong to people, it belongs to places. And this dust? Might just be one. As you tuck everything back, you feel something settle in your chest. This section of the pouch, these animal traces and tokens, weren't for show. They were bridges. Between worlds. Between instincts and intellect. Between man and nature, long before we drew hard lines between them. Because the druid didn't just see a raven. They were the raven. They didn't just collect feathers. They listened to what feathers whispered in the wind. And with that, you close this wild, delicate layer of the pouch, knowing what comes next will likely be heavier, sharper, stranger, but still waiting, just beneath the fur. You've met the feathers and the fur. You've brushed wings older than some ruins and poked at charms that smelled like thunderclouds. But now, the pouch shifts again, and this time the sound it makes is metallic. A muffled clank, soft but sharp. Your fingers brush cold edges, smooth in places, jagged in others. You lift up the first piece, a crescent of bronze, thin and light, shaped like a claw but clearly man-made. It doesn't match any tool you've seen, and it's too delicate to be a weapon. It's etched, fine lines crisscross the surface, like a spiderweb drawn by someone with a compass and way too much time. An amulet? A ritual hook? Historians still argue whether these obscure metal bits were symbolic tools or early forms of proto-jewelry, but whatever it is, it hums faintly in your fingers. Next to it, another shape, this one a coiled disc of copper wire, warped from time, but still looped tightly. The Celts were master metalworkers, and their designs often leaned towards spirals, loops, and interconnected forms. This could have been a binding charm, a protective knot, or even a votive offering in miniature. Or maybe it was wrapped around something once, bone, stick, feather, and you're only seeing the frame. You find more. A flat triangle of bronze with punched dots forming a pattern. A capstone to something? A charm plate? Or was it sewn onto fabric? That's part of the mystery. Some of these metal bits weren't designed to be worn or displayed. They were hidden, folded into pouches, buried in earth, passed from hand to hand with no explanation, just knowing. A secret language made of copper and silence. One piece catches your eye, a spiral of tin, notched with 3 tiny marks along one side. At first glance, it's unremarkable. But the notches are deliberate. 3 is a recurring sacred number in Celtic belief, the triple goddess, the triskelion, the triad of land, sea, and sky. Even now, Celtic knots loop and twist endlessly without beginning or end. You wonder if this was a tiny code. A portable reminder. A vow. And here's where it gets weirder. One of the items is magnetic. Mildly. Not enough to stick to anything. You're not carrying a fridge, obviously, but enough to tug slightly when held near a second curved piece. Natural magnetism? Or clever alloy design? Historians still argue whether ancient Celts understood magnetism in a ritual context, but this pairing feels intentional. You place them together, and they rest like puzzle pieces, quiet, but charged. Now you're pulling out something heavier. A flattened lump of iron, shaped vaguely like a spoon without a handle. Charcoal black, crusted with age. You run a finger across the dip, it's smooth. Too smooth to be random. Maybe it was a fire dish. Maybe it held oil, or ash, or even blood. Whatever it did, it's clear it had a job. Because druids weren't just poets with leafy crowns, they were scientists of a kind. Alchemists, observers, manipulators of matter and meaning. Metal wasn't just a resource, it was a medium. A way to conduct energy, store memory, impress spirits, or just anchor a ritual before it drifted into dream. You stumble on a real surprise, a tiny gear. Wait, what? Okay, it's not a gear exactly, not like clockwork, but it looks like one. A round disc with spokes and a hole in the middle. Far too precise for coincidence. You blink. Maybe it's part of a clasp, or an old fibula brooch. But the pattern seems overly technical. You have to wonder, were ancient engineers hiding in the forest? Or was this a Roman leftover scavenged by a clever druid? It wouldn't be the first time cultures crossed and cross-pollinated. And it wouldn't be the last time historians debated the origin of something that didn't quite fit the narrative. And then you find the bead. It's bronze, about the size of a cherry pit, punched with holes so fine they must have taken hours. The holes form a spiral, again, always the spiral. It jingles faintly when shaken. A charm, a bell, or a focus for meditation. Some modern practitioners say such objects help center the mind, creating a low tone you can follow into trance. You try shaking it. The forest doesn't answer, but it feels like it could. Lastly, at the very bottom of the metal stash, you find a tangle of wire. It's copper, green with age, knotted in a confusing pattern. Not decorative, not efficient, but definitely deliberate. A binding spell, maybe. Some Celtic traditions involve tying knots while speaking a charm, then sealing it with earth or breath. The wire isn't pretty, but it's committed, which is arguably more important. As you lay out the collection in front of you, you realize none of these were ornamental. These weren't showpieces for public display. These were functional. The equivalent of carrying around a USB drive filled with sacred files, and no password reset option. You return each metal piece gently, letting them settle back into their creased corners of the pouch. They clink softly, like tiny wind chimes announcing the closing of a sacred drawer. You exhale. So much intent in such small things. But the pouch is far from empty. Because next comes the scent of something completely different. Warm. Sticky. Sweet. Beeswax. And beneath it? A sealed bundle you probably shouldn't open. But of course, you will. Your hand dives back into the pouch, this time guided more by scent than sight. It's subtle at first, a sweetness undercut by something older, almost resinous. You pull out a small bundle, soft to the touch and wrapped tightly in waxed linen. It squishes just slightly between your fingers. Yeah, that's beeswax. And a lot of it. The exterior is warm from your hand almost immediately. The wrapping is smooth but has that slightly tacky texture, like an envelope seal that's been there for decades, just waiting for someone nosy enough to test fate. And congratulations, it's you. You peel a corner open slowly. The beeswax stretches, reluctant to give up its secrets, like a stubborn snack wrapper from 2,000 years ago. Inside is a smaller pouch, leather, this time, sealed with hardened resin and a tiny stick acting as a plug. You uncap it gently, and what comes out is, surprisingly normal. A smell like honey mixed with damp forest earth, overlaid with herbs. Familiar and strange all at once. Inside is a paste, brown, glossy, and flecked with what looks like crushed seeds. You're not going to taste it. This is a bedtime story, not a survival challenge. But based on consistency and smell, it's probably a salve. Maybe for healing. Maybe for ceremony. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether these sticky concoctions were medicinal or magical. But let's be real, in Druidic culture, those two weren't exactly separate categories. Healing often involved prayer. Protection included poultices. You didn't treat just the body, you treated the spirit stuck inside it. Next to the salve is another wax-wrapped bundle, this one more rigid. You open it to find a pressed cake of dried berries. Bilberries, maybe. Or elderberry. Both had medicinal uses, boosting immunity, treating fevers. But they were also offerings. Drop a few on an altar, or into a spring, and suddenly your humble berry becomes a bridge to the spirit world. Nature's vending machine, but instead of snacks, you get guidance. Or dreams. Or maybe just a bird stealing your sacrifice when you're not looking. And here's something even stranger, a lump of animal fat wrapped in deerskin, mixed with an oily herb paste. It smells strong. Pungent. Not unpleasant, just unexpected. You'd think spoiled fat, but no, it's been preserved perfectly. Likely used for ointments, or maybe as a base for ritual paint. There are whispers in scholarly circles that Druids painted their faces or bodies before major rites, using mixtures of ash, herbs, and animal fat to create a sacred skin, half human, half myth. But wait, it gets even better. Because tucked in beside the fat is a tiny clay vial, corked with moss and sealed in wax. You open it, expecting more salve, and get powder instead. Dark red. Super fine. Probably ground from roots or berries, maybe ochre. The Celts used ochre for everything, paint, tattoos, burial rites. And while tattoo evidence is scarce, because skin doesn't really last 2,000 years unless you're a bog mummy, the idea that Druids used body markings in ritual is widely considered plausible. You take a breath and sniff the air again. The beeswax smell has deepened, layered now with the earthy tang of old resins and decayed floral oil. There's another pouch, yes, another one, hidden along the side seam, and when you pry it open, you find a stick of hardened resin. Pine pitch, maybe. Myrrh if we're getting fancy. Burned in rituals, melted for sealing charms, or just used as incredibly ancient glue. Honestly, this one's a 3-in-1. Nature's multitasker. Here's the part that really sticks with you. No pun intended, these aren't just random blobs of stuff. They're curated. You can feel the intention. The wax preserves more than just materials, it preserves decisions. This wasn't grab what's lying around the forest. This was select, seal, store, and carry. These were substances meant to do something. Heal, summon, protect, transform. And then you reach the bottom of this aromatic rabbit hole and find something simple. A beeswax tablet, maybe 2 inches wide, with marks etched into the surface. Some still faintly visible. Could be a name. Could be a spell. Could be a to-do list for some long-forgotten solstice. Wax tablets were used throughout the ancient world for temporary writing, notes, charms, things meant to be said and then wiped away. You run your finger across the grooves and wonder, what words lived here once? And who were they meant for? The final piece in this soft, scented section is something oddly modern, a wax-sealed packet that rattles. You unwrap it to find tiny, dried seeds. Poppy, maybe. Or flax. Some were used medicinally, others symbolically, poppy for sleep or death, flax for purity and communication. But these weren't for planting. They were carried as symbols, portable spells. Seeds of change, quite literally. As you place each item back, the pouch feels heavier, not in weight, but in presence. Like the smell alone has drawn something out of the woods around you. Something curious. Not hostile, but aware. You look down at your hands. They glisten slightly. A mix of beeswax, resin dust, and ancient herbal residue. Congratulations, you smell like a medieval apothecary who moonlights as a forest wizard. And weirdly, you don't mind. This section of the pouch wasn't about protection or power. It was about preservation. Of healing. Of memory. Of magic that sticks to your skin and never fully leaves. And as you tuck the wax bundle away, the pouch sighs again, shifting its weight. Because next up, carved wood. Symbols. And the tiniest wand you've ever seen. The beeswax scent still lingers on your fingers as you dive back into the pouch. Now, instead of squish, your hand meets firmness, something dry, rigid, but lightweight. It's wood, and not just any wood. This part of the pouch feels sacred in a different way, like you've stumbled onto someone's diary. Only, instead of words, you're about to read in whirls, carvings, and energy that feels like it hums in its sleep. You lift the first piece out. It's a sliver of ash wood, long and thin, no wider than your pinky finger, but smooth, polished, and slightly curved like it's been shaped by years of handling. The tip is rounded, not sharp, and the surface is covered in etched lines, short, slanted, almost rhythmic. Autumn. The ancient Celtic script that looks like a bunch of tally marks arranged vertically along the central line, often carved into stones, trees, or, in this case, wood. Each mark here likely carries a name, a word, or a thought. Autumn wasn't just writing. It was intention. Magic in shorthand. Some scholars believe these small wooden slips were used like bookmarks for the soul, portable reminders of spells, blessings, or even curses. You trace the lines and feel, not heat exactly, but recognition. Like the symbols know you're reading them, even if you don't understand a thing. Beneath that is something chunkier, a carved wooden bead, but much larger than anything you'd wear. It's about the size of a walnut and hollow in the center. The outer surface is covered in spirals, some deep, some shallow. And if you look closely, you notice the pattern forms a labyrinth. Not a maze, but a single path inward. That's a recurring motif in Druidic practice, journeys within. Not escape, but entry. These weren't distractions. They were doorways. There's more. A short rod, maybe 6 inches long, of elder wood. Elder was considered sacred, protective, powerful, and not to be cut lightly. This piece has clearly been handled with care. The bark's been stripped and replaced with tiny carvings, a moon, a series of dots, a pair of crossing lines that might represent the solstices. You hold it and feel like you're holding a fuse, not explosive, but active. This might have been a miniature wand, a directional tool for energy. Not Avada Kedavra, more let's nudge the veil aside and peek through. Historians still argue whether Druids used wands in the modern sense. Some say the idea is an invention of later magical systems. Others point to regional carvings, illustrations, and the sheer number of ceremonial sticks found buried near sacred sites. Whatever the case, this one doesn't feel like a toy. You reach in again and find a circle. Carved from wood, it fits snugly in your palm and feels warmer than the others. Yew is the tree of death and rebirth, a classic Celtic favorite. Some cultures used it for bows. Druids saw it as a symbol of eternal cycles. This ring might have been a meditation tool, or maybe an object to pass through fire smoke. You bring it to your nose and sniff. Yep, still smells faintly of charcoal. That's not history. That's residue. The next item is odd. A block of wood about the size of a matchbox, covered in holes. Not drilled, burned. Charred dots forming what might be a constellation pattern. You can almost see Orion. No, wait, that's not quite right. These aren't our stars. These are their stars. Markers of local mythologies long forgotten. Some scholars suggest that Druids used such boards to track time, seasonal shifts, or alignments for rituals. Others think they were mnemonic devices, visual memory aids. Like the world's oldest flashcards, but way cooler. Another small piece looks like nothing, just a stick, really. But it's wrapped in red thread, and the tip is darkened with something that looks like old blood or ochre. The thread's been wound in such a careful spiral that just know, it meant something. Possibly a protection charm, or a fertility prayer. Or maybe a binding spell. Not magic has roots in ancient Celtic rites. You imagine a druid speaking a name as they tied the thread, anchoring it in the physical world so it would echo in the spiritual. Then you find something sweet, literally. A tiny carved figure made of birchwood, shaped like a stylized human. Genderless, featureless, but with arms raised. It smells faintly of honey, like it was anointed in wax. Maybe a blessing charm. Maybe a household deity. Or maybe just someone's version of a comfort talisman, a tiny friend to hold when you needed courage and couldn't talk to the gods directly. And here's the kicker, a piece that looks like a flute but isn't. Hollowed elder twig, holes punched through one side, but blocked at the end with a stone plug. You blow through it, gently. No sound. It's not for music. It's for breath. For directing energy. For focusing exhalations during a chant or prayer. Some modern practitioners call it a wind whisper, though nobody's entirely sure what the Celts called it. If anything, you feel like you've just met the Druids' internal compass. These weren't weapons or currency. They were the emotional toolkit. A blend of reminders, rituals, and quiet affirmations carved from wood and carried like the core of a belief system in physical form. Each piece says, I belong to something bigger. Each one whispers, I help the world remember you. As you tuck the wood pieces back into the pouch, stacked gently, like firewood waiting for ritual flame, you realize something. The Druid didn't just carry tools. They carried stories. And what comes next might be what they wrote with, or what they burned. Either way, prepare for soot. The pouch feels warmer now, almost smoldering with residual energy. You can smell it before you touch it, that dry, slightly acrid scent of soot, like the ghost of a long-dead campfire. You reach in, expecting rough texture, and yep, your fingers come out dusted in fine, dark powder. Charcoal. Ash. And something else grainy that clings to your skin a little too affectionately. You brush it off on your pants, but that soot isn't just a mess. It's a clue. This part of the pouch? This is where the fire lives. Not the big bonfires you might imagine lighting up a solstice festival. This is the personal fire. The one meant to burn small, slow, and with very specific intention. The first object you pull out is a charcoal stick, blackened through, but still firm. One end is rounded smooth from years of use. This wasn't just for warmth. This was for drawing, on stone, on bark, on skin. Charcoal was a way to speak without words. It outlined ritual circles, marked thresholds, traced the invisible pathways where energy was meant to flow. Historians still argue whether the symbols found on cave walls and sacred stones were made by Druids or pre-Druid cultures, but one thing's certain, the practice of drawing meaning into the world has always burned with charcoal. Next to it is a handful of crushed ash flakes, fine and almost iridescent in the firelight. Yes, in your imagination there's firelight now, because how could there not be? These ashes might have come from sacred wood, oak, rowan, or yew. Each tree carried its own meaning. Oak was power, rowan was protection, and yew, well, yew was death and immortality. Fun double feature. These ashes weren't trash, they were relics. Sprinkled into soil, carried in cloth, smeared on the body. Ashes were what remained after transformation, and in Druidic logic, that made them incredibly potent. You dig deeper and find a piece of burned parchment. Still partially intact, though curled and darkened along the edges. There's a symbol on it, scorched into the fiber, not drawn. A spiral again, but this one pierced through by a single vertical line. It looks deliberate. You wonder if it was meant to be destroyed. A spell burned after use? A name released through flame? Scholars speculate that fire ceremonies were used to send messages to the otherworld, and what better postage stamp than smoke? One pouch inside this smoky section contains scorched bark. It flakes at the edges, still rough, but with tiny carvings. Birch or alder, most likely. Carving spells into bark was a low-tech high-impact move. Write your intention, then burn it to release it. If you're thinking, this sounds like something I saw at a yoga retreat, you're not wrong. People have been writing their fears and hopes on kindling since kindling was a thing. Another find surprises you, a flat, circular disc of clay with black residue in the grooves. A burned tablet. Basically, an ancient incense holder or mini fire bowl. This one's been well used, soot lines every dip and crevice. The Celts were known to burn herbs like vervain, mugwort, and juniper as offerings or during rituals. The smoke wasn't just for mood lighting. It was believed to carry prayers, cleanse the air, or guide spirits. You even find remnants of old herbs stuck in the edges of the disc, just enough to recognize. One looks like sage. Another? Maybe wormwood. And something sticky black with a tangy smell that's definitely not for salads. Burnt resin, maybe. Or the remains of a summoning blend. You don't breathe too deeply. Just in case. Then there's something heavier. You pull out a flint striker and a piece of pyrite. The tools to make fire. These were casual inclusions. A druid with a pouch like this didn't just need access to fire, they needed control. Lighting the fire was the first act of any ritual. It opened space. It declared, we're doing something sacred now. And doing it yourself, from spark to flame, with tools tucked into your own pouch? That's ritual with a capital R. What comes next is a little vial, clay, sealed with wax. You open it and find soot mixed with oil. It smells like pine, smoke, and time. This was ink. Or paint. Possibly both. Druidic ink recipes are long lost, but some reconstructions suggest they used soot mixed with berry juice, blood, or oil to draw symbols on skin or stone. Temporary tattoos, maybe. Or marks that only revealed themselves in firelight. The secrecy? Intentional. The magic? Unmistakable. One final thing, a small scorched piece of bone, blackened at the edge. Charred deliberately. Maybe used as a stylus. Or perhaps it was symbolic, a bone offered to the flame, burned as part of a rite to honor ancestors or ask for insight. Bone, once burned, becomes something between worlds. It holds memory, but not identity. A blank slate of spirit. As you gather these pieces, the charcoal, the ash, the burned discs, the soot and oil, you realize this section isn't just about destruction. It's about transformation. Fire wasn't the end. It was the moment before something else began. The Druid's pouch didn't just carry tools for lighting a fire. It carried pieces of fire itself. Burned things. Blessed things. Things that still smolder under the right touch. And as you repack the ashy remains, brushing soot from your skin, you can feel the next layer waiting. A scroll. Soft as skin. Whispering your name like it already knows you're going to read it, even if you really shouldn't. You hesitate. That scroll, it's not even fully visible yet, and still you know it's watching you. Or listening. Or maybe both. It rests just beneath the ashy tools and ritual dust, wrapped in a fold of hide that feels more like skin than leather. You gently tug it free, and it practically exhales in your hands, the way old parchment sometimes does when it hasn't seen light in a few centuries. It's soft. Deerskin. By the feel of it, not papyrus or bark. This wasn't meant for a library shelf. This was made to travel, bend, breathe. The edges are darkened slightly, maybe from smoke or oil. Maybe just from all the fingers that have unrolled it before you. And now it's your turn. You unroll it slowly, trying not to crack the surface. The script is there, curling and looping like vines in the margins of your vision. Not Roman. Not runes. This is something older. Probably autumn again, vertical and slanted marks stitched along a central line like a whispered chant laid flat. But then, something weirder. A symbol you don't recognize. It looks like an eye inside a spiral. Or maybe a seed surrounded by flame. Historians have seen similar markings in fringe discoveries, rock art and burial stones in Britain and Ireland that predate classical Celtic design. Some scholars argue these symbols weren't language at all but mnemonic triggers, prompts for oral recitations. You weren't supposed to read them. You were supposed to remember. Still, your fingers trace the lines instinctively. And suddenly, you understand something very druidic. This scroll isn't for you. It wasn't meant to be read by strangers. It was an extension of a life, a set of secrets folded into flesh and carried close. It might contain incantations, instructions, even genealogies, names of ancestors layered into ceremony, protected by the ritual act of writing them down and hiding them away. There's a smear across the lower half of the scroll, faded red-brown. You pause. Is it ochre? Ink? Blood? Hard to say. The Druids didn't separate the sacred from the physical the way we tend to. Ink could be made from ash, berries, iron rust, or someone's vein, depending on the purpose. This mark could be a signature. Or a sacrifice. Historians still argue whether Druids recorded spells like this at all, or whether this kind of scroll was an outlier, a field guide or personal reminder. But the detail here says something. This wasn't scribbled. This was carved. Intentionally. Tucked inside the scroll's fold is a thin strip of bone. About the size of a popsicle stick, but flatter. Etched with Ogam. Likely a tag or title. It may have read something like For Moonlight, or Not for Daylight, or Hey, maybe don't read this unless you want to wake up in a fog full of voices. The translation is lost, but the feeling is not. You find another scroll, not quite scroll-shaped. It's a coil of birch bark, wrapped and tied with a strand of braided hair. Human, you think. The bark is tougher, rougher, burned around the edges. But the inside? Still readable. The marks are scratches, symbols, not letters. You recognize a triskelion, 3 interlocking spirals that represent the 3 realms of land, sea, and sky. Or past, present, and future. Or life, death, and rebirth. Or breakfast, lunch, and dinner, depending on the level of your druid's spiritual hunger. You know how we say written in stone to mean something unchangeable? Druids probably said the same about scrolls like this. Not because the words couldn't be erased, but because once you spoke them, they lived. They unrolled into the world and didn't go back. At the very bottom of the scroll bundle is something truly bizarre, a stitched square of hide, sewn shut with sinew thread. You turn it over. Nothing on the outside. No marks. But inside? Something's there. It shifts ever so slightly when you squeeze it, solid, but soft. Maybe a bone chip. Maybe a folded piece of paper-thin bark. Or maybe it's a word. One word. A name. A secret too sacred to be shared, wrapped and sewn and hidden forever. You don't open it. Even in your imagination, you know better. Back in the main pouch, beside the scrolls, is a thin stick of charcoal bound with a feather. Likely used to write or sketch when ink wasn't practical. You imagine a druid huddled under a tree, scroll across their knees, whispering chants while sketching protective symbols into parchment that smelled like rain and blood and birch. And this is where the scroll section becomes more than just neat writing stuff. You realize that this part of the pouch wasn't about showing off literacy. It was about carrying knowledge. Words were magic, but they were also responsibility. A scroll wasn't just something you read, it was something you used. Or guarded. Or buried. And just maybe, if you were lucky, it used you back. You roll the main scroll gently, letting the deerskin fold in on itself like it remembers how. You place it back beside its companions, tucking the bone marker and hair-wrapped bark scroll on top. These were the inner thoughts of a druid. Not just what they knew, but what they believed. And now, deep in the pouch's quietest corner, you see the shimmer of bronze again. But this time, it's shaped like a necklace. A torque. And it hums with memory. Your fingers catch on something cool, smooth, and unmistakably metallic. But this isn't another weird bronze bead or mystery gear. This piece has weight, not just physically, but symbolically. You pull it into the light and your breath catches, just a little. It's a torque. Small, coiled, and beautifully preserved, with terminals shaped like two wolf heads snarling at each other. Classic Celtic drama. Torques were the power necklaces of the ancient world. Reserved for warriors, nobles, gods, or, in this case, druids. Most were large enough to be worn around the neck, thick bands of bronze or gold or even twisted iron, designed to show off strength, status, and style. But this one is much smaller. Wrist-sized, maybe. Or made for a child. Or something not exactly human. You turn it over in your palm. The metal is etched with tight spiral patterns and tiny symbols worn almost smooth. It's clearly ceremonial. You can feel it before you even start making stuff up about it. Druids were known to wear torques as part of their ritual attire, not just for bling, but as conduits of power, conducting energy through the body like a wire in a storm. Some were gifts from patrons. Others were buried with them, carried into the otherworld as eternal adornments. And not all torques were created equal. This one, though smaller, seems more deliberate than decorative. It hums faintly when you hold it against your skin. Just a little warmth. You're probably imagining it. Probably. You pull out another item, a twisted bronze ring, sized for a finger but heavy for its size. The band is notched 3 times on one side and once on the other. Historians still argue whether druidic rings like this were symbolic tokens or practical tools. Some say they were counting devices, like early abacuses for chants or ritual cycles. Others believe they represented vows, each notch marking a promise made, or a year passed, or a vision received. You slip it on, just for a second, and feel a faint pressure, like it's remembering every hand it's ever belonged to. Next comes a chain. Not like modern chains. This one's made of interlocked spiral links, each no bigger than a thumbnail, held together by what looks like plant fiber. You pull gently and realize it's surprisingly strong. Could be a belt, could be a headband, could be both. Fashion was flexible when you were casting spells in the forest. One of the links has a bead of amber threaded through it, warm and golden, like a captured piece of sunset. Amber was considered sacred, tree resin hardened into something eternal. It was carried to ward off illness, attract good fortune, and connect the wearer with the energy of ancient forests. There's also a pendant, round, thin, and stamped with a familiar spiral motif. But the metal isn't bronze. It's lead. That's unusual. Lead was used sparingly in Celtic artifacts, often associated with darker rituals, binding spells, protective talismans, or even curses. You hold it up and realize there's something scratched on the back. It looks like a name. You can't read it, but the hair on your arm definitely does. Then you find what looks like a hairpin, only longer and more ornate, topped with a tiny boar's head and engraved with aga marks spiraling down its shaft. It's not just for keeping your locks neat, it's a symbolic weapon, a ritual pointer, maybe even a miniature staff. Some scholars believe druids carried these to draw attention, command focus, or literally conduct their rites, channeling energy like lightning rods of sacred geometry. One small object is surprisingly plain, a flat, circular disc of copper, polished smooth, with a hole at the top. No markings. No embellishments. Just a blank mirror. Druids might have carried these as scrying tools, primitive mirrors meant not to reflect faces, but possibilities. You stare into it, and, yep, just your own slightly haunted expression. But you get it. In the right light, with the right words, this could become a window. The next item might be the most unexpected, a bracelet made of braided horsehair and copper wire. It's humble, almost rustic. Nothing fancy. But the texture is firm, purposeful. Horsehair was considered sacred. Horses were revered in Celtic culture, symbols of motion, travel, and transformation. To carry a bracelet like this was to carry forward momentum. This wasn't jewelry. It was a reminder, keep moving, even when the path is covered in mist. Finally, nestled in a corner of the pouch's cloth lining, you find the tiniest torque of all, so small it would only fit a doll. Or maybe, a spirit. That's the unnerving thought. It's beautifully detailed, silver wire twisted into perfect coils, with microscopic terminals shaped like horns. Not human. Not animal. Maybe intended for a household god, a forest sprite, or something more ephemeral. Some theories suggest druids crafted offerings like this for entities we no longer name. Spirits of place. Echoes in the rocks. Guardians of silence. You place each object back into the pouch slowly, handling them like the artifacts, and maybe the companions, that they are. Because now you see it clearly, this wasn't just decoration. It was identity. Each torque, ring, and pendant was a symbol worn inward as much as outward. An extension of belief. A piece of a worldview in metal form. And now that you've seen how the druid adorned themselves, it's time to listen. Because the next thing waiting in the pouch plucks one note and makes your bones vibrate. There it is again, that faint vibration. Not in the ground. Not in the air. Inside you. Like a low hum hiding beneath your heartbeat. You reach back into the pouch, and this time what comes out doesn't clank or crumble or bleed ancient plant oils. It sings. Just a little. A string. Just one. You hold it between your fingers, thin, golden, and possibly fine. It's wound tightly at one end, frayed slightly at the other. The tension in it is real, even limp in your hand. This was once stretched across something. Maybe wood. Maybe bone. Maybe the space between what is and what's supposed to be. It's a harp string. That's right, druids, or at least some high-level practitioners in Celtic society, were connected to the harp. The instrument wasn't just for lullabies and pub sessions. It was sacred. Storytellers, or bards, often trained in druidic practice, carried music like it was spellwork. A well-played harp wasn't entertainment. It was transport. And this string? You can feel that it remembers where it's been. You hold it close, and something very soft echoes in your mind, one note. Faint, but crystalline. That's probably your imagination, right? Except you didn't want to hear anything, and there it was. Ancient tales say a skilled bard could play 3 strains, one to make you laugh, one to make you cry, and one to lull you into deep sleep. You, my friend, may be flirting with that third one right now. You tuck the string gently into your lap and keep exploring. Wrapped in worn linen is something stick-like. No, not a wand this time, it's a bridge. Literally, a small harp bridge. Made of you, notched precisely to hold strings. It fits the tension of the wire you just found perfectly. The harp this came from must have been portable, personal. Some historians speculate traveling druids carried small lyres to invoke spirits, shift the mood, or memorize incantations through rhythm. Others argue the musical role was reserved strictly for bardic orders, not full-fledged druids, but, as usual, the historical record is full of poetic maybes. You dig again and find what looks like a pick, or the ancient cousin of one. Bone, flattened, and polished. It has a worn groove along the edge, clearly used to pluck or strum. Musical tools like this weren't just for performance. Music itself was believed to hold structure, the same kind the universe danced to. Sound waves were more than noise. They were pathways. Then comes the strange part. You find a shell. A small conch-like object, partially broken on one side, but still with a hollow interior. When you blow into it, it doesn't make a sound, just pushes air. But if you listen closely afterward, you swear something answers. A wind? A distant whistle? A sound not quite outside your head? Some theories say druids used natural instruments to mimic the calls of animals, spirits, or elements. Shells, pipes, whistles, simple things with big energy. You can imagine a ceremony beginning with that low, breathy call. It doesn't demand attention. It pulls it. You unwrap another cloth and discover a ring of tiny bells, no larger than beads. Bronze, slightly oxidized. Each one chimes with a high, pure note. Not loud, just insistent. You shake them and feel the sound in your teeth. Bells were often used in Celtic ritual to cleanse space, banish bad energy, or mark sacred moments. Some believe druids would wear these while walking sacred paths, the jingling alerting unseen presences that something important was about to begin. And now you find something almost too delicate, a feather quill with its tip hardened in black resin. Not for writing, for tapping, or beating time. You test it against your palm and hear the faintest tick. This isn't for making music, it's for marking rhythm. Chanting. Repeating syllables in time with heartbeat and breath until the world starts to change. And now the fringe stuff. Because every pouch has at least one item that makes you say, wait, what? This time? It's a flat disc of carved wood, just larger than a coin, with a single hole through the center and radial lines etched like sun rays. You blow through the hole, and it whirs. A simple noisemaker. Or maybe a wind charm. Ancient children's toy? Possibly. Spirit summoner? Equally possible. Historians still debate the purpose of these bull roarer-style objects, but they're found across Celtic and even Aboriginal traditions. One pull of the string and the disc spins, creating a low drone that imitates wind or voice. There's one more thing. A small leather pouch, yes, inside the main pouch again, like a nesting doll of secrets. This one's stitched tight, but you manage to open it. Inside, wax plugs. Earplugs, essentially. Hand-formed beeswax pieces meant to block sound. You laugh, quietly. Either someone knew their harp playing wasn't that good, or, more likely, these were used to seal oneself off during meditation or journeying rituals. Sound is sacred, but so is silence. Especially the kind you choose. You pack the musical artifacts back carefully. The string, the bells, the shell and the feather in that strange, whispery disc. These were tools for tuning, not just instruments, but adjustments. A druid needed to strike chords not just in wood and string, but in reality itself. Because sometimes, to speak to the gods, you have to hum first. And just when you think the pouch can't surprise you again, your hand finds something hard. Natural. Sharp-edged. Antler. And on it? The stars. You draw it out slowly, an antler fragment, about the length of your hand, and carved so delicately it practically vibrates with intention. The bone has yellowed with age, and the texture is that satisfying blend of smooth and weathered, like it's been handled so many times that even the spirits gave up trying to wear it down. But what really catches your eye are the markings. Not the ogham slashes this time. Not spirals, either. This is something different. Tiny dots, lines, and intersecting curves. A star map. Or at least, their version of one. The Celts didn't leave behind neat diagrams of constellations with tidy Latin names. What they did leave were clusters of marks on bone, stone, and wood that seemed to mimic the night sky. Some scholars believe these markings represent star groups like the Pleiades, Orion's belt, or even the Milky Way. Others argue they were symbolic, not literal, maps of spiritual navigation, rather than cosmic cartography. And you, holding this fragment, feel like maybe it's both. You tilt it, and the constellation pattern catches the light. Maybe it's the stars. Maybe it's just the memory of looking up. Underneath it lies another antler shard, flatter, etched with what could be a calendar, 28 tiny notches carved in a perfect arc lunar cycle. Druids were obsessed with the moon. Not in a dreamy, poetry journal way, but in a ritual, get things done at the right time kind of way. They tracked its phases meticulously, building ceremonies around full moons, new moons, and the shadowy in-betweens. The moon told them when to gather herbs, when to bless the sick, when to marry, or when to disappear into the woods for 3 days without telling anyone. You find more. A polished horn tip carved into a point, maybe a stylus, maybe a pointer for tracing maps or stars. The base is decorated with a circle and cross symbol, often thought to represent the sun or the 4 directions. Could this have been used to teach apprentices? To point at the sky and say, "There. That's where your soul came from." The pouch has an entire sub-pocket of these antler tools. A thin wand-like piece has a curling handle, clearly formed for a specific grip. On the side, etched directions. East, south, west, north, but not in English, obviously. In marks that correlate with wind patterns, seasonal changes, maybe even old oral mnemonics no one remembers anymore. Historians still argue whether the Druids had a codified system of celestial observation or if each region developed its own sky language. But clearly, something was standardized. Because this tool feels practiced, used, trusted. And then you find a disc, thin, round, made of carved antler, and drilled with holes around the edge like the petals of a flower. Each hole is notched with a tiny rune or scratch. In the center, a spiral. It's a calendar, most likely, or a ritual selector, something you turn gently with your finger until it aligned with the right season, the right day, the right feeling. Sort of like a mystical combination lock that opens nothing but timing. Another piece is longer, more wand-like. Antler again, yes, but shaped like a staff in miniature. Etched all over with stars, suns, waves, and what looks like a crescent moon cradling a dot. Birth, perhaps, or an eclipse. This piece hums differently. Not a note, like the harp string. A tone. Subtle, but solid. You hold it up, and somehow the forest around you feels a half-degree more awake. You also find a few fragments that were clearly part of a larger tool, perhaps an astrolabe-like device, though cruder. Or maybe not. Who are we to judge an ancient spiritual GPS just because it's made from bone and not brass? These pieces show that even without telescopes, people looked upward with fierce attention. And they didn't just observe. They belonged to the sky. The stars weren't distant, they were siblings. Tucked in one leather roll are 5 tiny pieces of antler shaped like arrows. Not weapon tips, these are flat, broad, and etched with what seem like elemental symbols. Fire, water, air, earth, and a 5th you can't quite name. Spirit? Time? Memory? Each one might have been used in divination, cast onto a cloth or into a circle of stones to reveal the unseen. Or maybe they were markers, laid on a chart to guide someone through a rite of passage only Druids dared speak aloud. And here's something odd, a disc so worn it's nearly blank, except for one single groove running diagonally across the face. You hold it up to your own eye, turn slowly, and realize this isn't a decoration. It's a viewer. Maybe a line to the sunrise. Or maybe it was used to see the stars during daytime, when only trained eyes and tradition could point out what lay invisible above. You begin to understand, this pouch wasn't just sacred because of its rituals. It was an archive. A working cosmos. Every item here carried a lesson, a warning, or a map. These antler tools weren't trophies. They were navigators. And the person who carried them wasn't just a forest priest. They were an astronomer. A timekeeper. A stargazer who didn't just look upward, but interpreted what the stars said back. As you tuck the antler tools back into their tight fold, you hear a soft clink. The pouch still has more to say. But the next item isn't quite solid. It's soil. And it's not just dirt, it's history in your hand. You reach into the pouch, expecting something firm again, a shard, a charm, maybe another mystery bone, and instead, your fingers sink into softness. Crumbly. Dry. Grainy. It's a small cloth bag, tied with a knot that's just loose enough to feel like an invitation. You tug the string open and tip it gently into your palm. Dirt. Okay, not thrilling at first glance, but this isn't the kind of dirt you shake out of your shoes after a walk. This is collected dirt. Intentional dirt. And you can tell that before you even start reading into it, because it's not one texture, it's layered. Dark, rich loam. Fine, gray dust. Clay red granules. Even a tiny fleck of crushed white chalk. This is soil with a backstory. You lean in and take a slow sniff. It smells dry. A little like burnt leaves, a little like stone after rain. And just beneath that, something like iron. Or memory. This kind of pouch has been found buried in ceremonial pits, tucked under standing stones, or clasped in the hands of the dead. Historians speculate about the meaning. Was it symbolic? A link to a sacred place? A portable altar? A piece of home? The best guess? Yes. All of it. You sift through the soil carefully and spot something odd, a tiny black pebble, polished to a sheen. It sits in the dirt like it's always belonged there. It could be a piece of jet or volcanic glass, materials often used in Celtic amulets. Jet especially was believed to have protective properties, warding off evil and anchoring the spirit. But here, in a bag of dirt? Maybe this was an offering. Maybe it marked the reason the dirt was taken. And here's the twist, this isn't just one type of dirt. Another pouch, just below it, holds something heavier. Red clay, dense and cold even in your warm hand. This likely came from a burial site or a ceremonial mound. The Celts saw certain soils as imbued with the energies of the dead, or the divine. Red soil was often symbolic of blood and life force. Not in a creepy horror movie way. More in the life feeds life sense. You hold it, and it almost feels like it's pulsing. Just barely. Then you find the third pouch. It's lighter. Almost sand-like. Pale, with tiny shell fragments mixed in. You blink. This came from the coast. You smell it and, yes, salt, old and quiet. It's beach sand. The kind you'd only gather if you knew exactly where the tide met the rock and the wind told stories. This isn't about summer vacation. This is liminal soil. Shoreline stuff. The place between earth and sea, between the worlds. Druids respected these in-between places. Rivers, cliffs, beaches. Places that were quite one thing or another. And taking a piece of that? That's not just a souvenir. That's access. You sift through this sandy blend and find what looks like a fishbone. Tiny. Almost a splinter. But it's been charred. Burned, intentionally. Some speculate these were used in sea rites, calling on water spirits or storm entities. Or maybe they were just offered back to the tide as payment for safe passage. Either way, this dirt isn't random. It's ritual in powdered form. Then comes the last soil pouch. This one's different. Heavier, yes, but also wrapped in something extra, moss. The outside is lined with dried moss, and inside? Dark soil mixed with crushed leaves and something sharp. You pull out a shard of stone, no bigger than a fingernail, but flaked like a blade. Flint. And next to it? A fleck of old bone. This is battlefield soil. You don't know it, but you know. Something about the density. The weight. The fact that someone collected this not to remember a place, but to remember a moment. A moment of blood, of honor, or of loss. In Celtic belief, soil from a battle or grave was potent. Carried not just memory, but energy. Used in cursing rites, maybe. Or healing ones. It depended on what you asked the earth to give you. And how well you listened. Some fringe theories say Druids marked specific patches of earth with secret maps, geometric memory systems encoded in natural formations. There's no hard evidence, of course. But when you hold this pouch of dirt, it feels like you're holding a story with no words. Just feeling. You find one more thing. A twig. Yes, just a twig. But it's tucked into the dirt, like a bookmark. And it's tied with a knot of grass, dried and still intact. This was a placeholder. A memory tied into matter. The druid who owned this pouch didn't just walk the land. They carried it. In pieces. In weight. In offerings. You place each pouch back in the leather fold, careful not to mix them. Each one was taken for a reason. A sight. A moment. A soul. And now, that soul is still whispering through loam and salt and dust. But beneath those soft crumbles and grains, something harder presses against your palm. A tooth. And it's warm. You pull it out slowly, half expecting it to bite back. A tooth. Not just any tooth, long, curved, and impossibly smooth, like it's been polished by centuries of hands and thought. It's larger than it should be for a human, smaller than a bear's, and not quite shaped like anything your modern mind is ready to identify. But what's weirder than its mystery? It's warm. Not body temperature warm. Sunstone warm. Like it's holding on to heat from some other world. You stare at it for a moment. This is the kind of object that feels like it shouldn't exist. The kind you'd glance at in a museum and think, wow, that's neat, and move on, except now it's in your palm, and it feels like it's breathing. Historians have found similar teeth tucked in ancient graves and hoards, some clearly animal, others shaped or carved to look that way. They were used as amulets, hung from cords, kept in pockets, or placed beneath stones. The Celts believed certain animal parts, especially those from apex predators, held the essence of the creature's power. So, carrying a tooth? That wasn't creepy. It was practical. And not always literal. Some of these teeth came from animals long dead. Others, maybe, were carved from bone or horn to resemble a specific tooth, mimicking its energy. You rub your thumb over the ridges and feel a tiny series of notches, deliberate markings, like tally scratches or a kind of braille for druids. They could be part of an old spell, or a warning, or both. Some French scholars argue that objects like this acted as spiritual compasses. When held under moonlight, they hummed when pointed in a sacred direction. You're skeptical, until you hold the tooth up and it buzzes, ever so slightly. Probably just your imagination. Probably. Beneath the tooth, wrapped tightly in linen, you find more. A pouch of small molars. 5 of them, all different shapes, all different colors. Some flat, others pointed. Animal for sure. You line them up, and something clicks. Not metaphorically, literally. The way they rest against each other, they form a curve, like a small jawbone reconstructed piece by piece. Were they carried as a whole? Or gathered one by one, over time, each representing a story, a moment, or a specific rite? There's a theory, half academic, half whispered folklore, that druids used animal parts to create vessels of memory. Not trophies, not charms, but recordings. Each tooth holding a fragment of a journey. A season. A sacrifice. You roll one between your fingers, and for a second, you feel a chill breeze, smell moss and blood, hear a stag cry in the dark. Gone as quickly as it came. At the bottom of this bundle, you find the most unsettling piece yet, a human tooth. Small. Flat. Maybe a child's. Maybe not. It's been drilled through the root, worn smooth around the hole, like it was strung on a cord and carried often. You feel that same sense of reverence as with the other items. This wasn't casual. It was sacred. In some traditions, human teeth were tokens of grief, memory, or protection, kept not out of morbid fascination, but because that person mattered, or still mattered, or was needed. Druids may have used such a token to speak with the dead, or to carry a voice, or to ensure someone didn't truly pass away. Historians still debate the ethics, and even the reality, of such practices. Was it superstition? Mourning? Necromancy? Maybe the answer is yes to all 3. You wrap the teeth again and place them back. But the pouch isn't finished. At the base of the bundle is a round, stone medallion, about the size of a biscuit, with a groove shaped like a tooth pressed into its center. A fitting stone. It cradled a tooth once. Maybe the one you're holding now. Was it part of a ritual? A storage device for power? Or maybe it was used to lock the object in place until it was needed. Like a magical safety deposit box. You hold the stone and the large curved tooth together again. Click. A perfect fit. You didn't expect that. There's also a small tag, a sliver of bark, tucked into the folds. Aga marks dance along its side, spelling out what could be a name. Maybe of the creature, or the druid, or the ritual itself. Whatever it says, it feels final. Like a title. Like the name of a story that only gets told once, if you're lucky enough to be there. You rewrap everything gently, brushing the dust from your hands as you do. These weren't tokens of fear. They were reminders of connection. To predator and prey. To the earth and what it gives. To death and what it doesn't take. And as you slide the bundle back into the pouch's soft lining, the warmth from the tooth lingers in your palm a moment longer than it should. And then, ding. A bell. But not from outside. From the pouch. Waiting. Silent. Until you stop moving. The moment you go still, it happens. A bell rings. Not loud. Not cheerful. Just there. A single, soft ting from somewhere inside the pouch, like it was waiting for your breath to pause. You freeze. You tilt your head. It doesn't repeat, which somehow makes it worse. You dig back into the pouch and your fingers brush something cold and round. Then something thinner, like a string or chain. You tug gently, and out comes a tiny bronze bell, no taller than your thumb. Simple in shape, but not in energy. You shake it. Nothing. No sound at all. Not even the dull clack of a loose clapper. You hold it up to your ear. Still nothing. And then, when you're about to give up, it rings again. All on its own. You jump slightly. Not because it's loud, but because you didn't do anything. This bell plays by its own rules. These kinds of bells have been found at ancient sites across the Celtic world, usually buried near thresholds, doorways, or water sources. Sometimes they were worn, other times tied to staffs or trees. Historians believe they were used to signal the presence of spirits, mark sacred time, or wake the dead. Seriously. Wake the dead. Fringe researchers even argue some were attuned to energy shifts, ringing not by wind or hand, but by presence. You place the bell on your palm and still, ting. A second ring. You set it down quickly, respectfully. Right next to it is a matching bell. Slightly smaller, tarnished, shaped more like a teardrop. This one does ring when shaken. A higher pitch, like wind over a bottle. You imagine Druids using them to mark the beginning and end of ritual, a kind of sonic doorway. One sound to open, one to close. In a world before clocks, sound was time. Tied to the smaller bell is a string of beads, wood, bone, amber, each carved with a mark. Possibly a lunar cycle. Possibly names. Possibly a chant encoded in material form. The string ends in another tiny bell, cracked at the base. When you shake it, it doesn't ring, but the other two do. As if the silent bell is giving orders, and the others answer. Creeped out? A little. But also curious. You lay them in your lap and keep digging. You find a chime next, not a bell, exactly, but a sliver of thin bronze curved into a half-moon and suspended on leather cord. It makes a long, clear tone when struck. Not sharp, just steady. You run your fingernail across it, and it rings so softly you feel it in your chest more than you hear it in your ear. Sound was sacred to the Celts. Music, yes, but resonance even more. They understood what we now call vibrational medicine without using the phrase. The idea that everything, stone, skin, spirit, has a frequency. And sometimes, to shift the unseen, you need to ring something just right. You find more bells. 3 of them, each shaped differently. One shaped like a triangle, another like a drop of water, and the last like a pine cone. They each produce a different pitch, low, mid, high, possibly used together in ritual to harmonize space. Or to call different entities. Or, maybe, to align internal states, body, mind, and spirit. There's a strip of parchment folded among them, too, barely clinging to its form. Ink stains, still readable. Just a few marks. Possibly a chant or phrase. One word stands out, clock, Old Irish for bell. This might have been a guide. Or a warning. Or maybe just a set list. At the bottom of the sound section, nestled in a wrap of rabbit fur, is one final piece. A tuning fork. Or at least, something like it, 2 slim bronze prongs, joined at the base, designed to ring when struck. You hit it against a stone and it vibrates, humming a long, sustained note that almost vibrates your teeth. It's subtle, but deep. Not meant to entertain. Meant to align. Druids may have used something like this to attune themselves, or their space, before a rite. Some even say sound was used to open gateways in sacred areas, especially where ley lines crossed or stones hummed naturally. Whether that's true or not, this fork feels like it's meant to unlock something. Not a door, but maybe an understanding. A moment. A shift. You sit for a while in silence, letting the tones settle. The pouch, though still holding plenty, feels quieter now. Like it needed you to hear something before continuing. These bells and tones weren't decorations. They were keys. Each one opening something, a state of mind, a passage, a memory. You wonder how many times this pouch rang softly in a dark grove, beneath a cold moon, while someone waited for the gods to answer. And maybe the ringing wasn't meant to summon anything. Maybe it was meant to remind something it was still there. You pack the bells back carefully, like laying down the last words of a chant. And then your hand brushes wool. Soft, coarse, and hiding something that moves when you touch it. The final item? Wrapped so tight it doesn't want to be found. But of course, you're going to open it. Because something inside the pouch just breathed. You hesitate. Because what you're holding now isn't an object. It's a presence. The wool bundle is warm, like it's been against a body or near a fire. Tightly wrapped, bound with a plaited strip of hide, and sealed with a waxy, hardened knot that crackles slightly as you press it. It's breathing. Not literally, of course. Probably. But it shifts when you touch it. Not dramatically, just enough to make your thumb twitch and your rational brain say, maybe just don't. You do, obviously. The binding unwraps slowly, the wool falling back in folds like a blanket being peeled from an ancient sleeper. The innermost layer is something softer, animal skin, maybe fawn or lamb, oiled and worn translucent. You peel that aside too. And there it is. The final object. Or maybe not an object at all. It's hard to describe. Not because it's complex. Because it refuses to settle into your understanding. A lump of something, grayish, dappled, dense but pliant. About the size of your fist. At first, you think it's a stone. But it's too soft. Then maybe a resin? No, too fibrous. It shifts slightly in your palm, reacting to your warmth, almost like it's tuning itself to you. You don't know what it is. And neither do historians. That's the point. Every few decades, someone finds something like this, buried deep in a barrow, tucked in a coffin hand, or clutched beneath a megalith. These odd, unclassifiable relics made of unknown materials, sealed in layers, always near the most sacred objects. Labeled in museum archives as unidentified organic matter or ritual object, unknown function. You roll it between your hands and find, yep, it pulses. Not heartbeat pulses. More like a memory twitch. Like it's remembering being held before. There's a faint groove along one side. You trace it. It deepens under your touch. A spiral, again, but imperfect, like it was started and never finished. Like the person carving it wasn't drawing something they saw, but something they felt. And now you feel it too. Warmth. Weight. Something between comfort and warning. This thing doesn't want to hurt you. But it does want to be respected. You set it down in your lap and notice a smear on your hand. Dark, earthy, faintly metallic. Not blood. Not ink. Something older. You wipe it off, but it leaves a tingle in your fingertips. You turn back to the bundle, checking for more. There is something else, nestled in a corner of the wool. A twist of hair. Black, coarse, and bound with red thread. At first, you think it's human. But on closer inspection, it's too long. Not horsehair, either. Boar, maybe? Or wolf. You hold it near your face, and, yep, still smells faintly of cedar and sweat and intent. This was carried as part of a spell. No doubt. Some Celts believed a lock of hair bound a person, or an animal, across distances. It could protect. Or curse. Or call. And this one? It feels alive. Not in a creepy, slithery way. In a still listening way. Tied to the hair is a bead. Black glass, pierced through the center. Likely volcanic, obsidian, or something similar. This wasn't just decoration. It was an anchor. A way to hold the energy in place. Even now, it feels tethered. Like pulling the hair would drag something back with it. Something ancient. Something curious. You don't pull. Instead, you lift the wool wrap one more time and notice it's embroidered on the inside. Simple, rough stitching in a faded ochre thread. Not letters. Not Ogham. Just one symbol, a circle, pierced by 3 short lines. Some scholars interpret this as a representation of the 3 realms, land, sea, and sky. Others see it as body, mind, and spirit. Or past, present, and future. Or maybe it's just you. You don't know. And maybe you're not supposed to. You pack the bundle again, slower this time. Not because you're afraid, but because you're reverent. Whatever this final object is, whether it's a container for a forgotten spirit, a vessel for a secret, or just an idea made physical, it matters. You tuck the wool closed, rewrap the hide, retie the plaited cord. The pouch sags a little now, like it's exhaled. And you realize something. The Druid's pouch wasn't just full of ingredients. It was a body. Muscle, bone, memory, breath. Each item an organ. Each layer a system. You've opened it all. Seen every piece. But one section remains. Not an object. A name. And it's stitched into hair. Yours? Maybe. Let's find out. You don't reach into the pouch this time. It reaches into you. There's nothing left to pull, no more bundles, beads, or bones. Just the lining. But even that feels intentional, like a final message sewn into the skin of this ancient container. Your fingers explore the interior slowly, brushing against what you think is just another fold. It's not. It's a twist of hair, curled, braided, and stitched directly into the seam of the pouch. At first, you think it's decoration. Then you realize it's writing. A name. Not in letters, of course. In strands. This isn't alphabet soup. It's identity spelled in biology. The braid moves slightly under your touch, not alive, but reactive. And not just one braid. 3. Twined. Together, knotted in a loop. The first is black and coarse, like the boar hair you found before. The second is reddish gold, finer, like human hair. The third? Almost silvery, but stiff, like woven straw or maybe something less botanical. These aren't just aesthetics. They're a triad. Another echo of the Celtic obsession with threes. You've seen it everywhere by now. Spirals, triskelions, the triple lines on bones and bark. Druids believed in balance not as an abstract ideal, but a working system: action, reaction, reflection. Past, present, potential. You run your fingers along the braid, and beneath it, etched into the leather itself, is a groove. Faint, but it follows the line of the braid like a shadow. A name? A spell? You don't know. And maybe you do. It's your name. Not your modern one, not the one on your coffee cup. The one you don't say. The one you feel. The name you had in dreams. The one that showed up in a story you read when you were 6, and then again on a gravestone when you were 28, and then again in a song you couldn't stop humming the day your life changed. That name. The braid vibrates under your fingertips. Your heart picks up. Not panic. Recognition. A beat in sync with something that's been buried under layers of logic and Netflix and paying rent. The lining unfolds further. You didn't notice it was double-stitched. Inside is a fragment of cloth. Thin. Faded green. Marked with tiny white dots that don't look like anything until you stare too long. Then they become a face. Not human. Not animal. Just aware. A spirit, maybe. Or the idea of one. Some druid pouches contained personal tokens, things the owner made themselves, infused with their essence. This was not for public use. This was a conversation piece. Between soul and source. And this fragment? It carries a whisper. You press it to your chest, not out of ritual, just instinct, and feel the beat inside your ribs match the tremor of the braid. The pouch isn't just an archive. It's a mirror. A container for the parts of yourself that never stopped believing in signs and stones and stories that didn't need to make sense to be true. The name in the lining? It's both ancient and immediate. You don't hear it. You remember it. And as you do, something clicks. Not an object this time. A connection. The forest around you shifts, not visually, not audibly, but in tone. It knows you've seen it. The full depth. The whole weight. The druid who carried this wasn't just a healer or a sage. They were a keeper. Of moments. Of meanings. Of you. Because in this pouch, this impossible bag of secrets and smells and sounds, you've uncovered not just what a druid carried. You've uncovered what they were. And it's not over. One more item rests in the lining. Not touchable. Not seeable. But waiting. It doesn't move unless you do. It doesn't speak unless you listen. It's shaped like your reflection in a puddle just before you step into it. It's the object you can't describe. Because it's you. And as you close the pouch for the last time, the wind stirs in the trees. Not rustling. Applauding. And somewhere in that movement, you hear it again. The bell. Just once. You're still holding the pouch. You haven't let go of it. Not really. Not since the first moment you opened it and the forest seemed to lean in just a little closer. But now it's different. Now, it's not just the weight in your hand. It's the shape of everything you've learned. And it's pressing back. The pouch feels heavier than ever, not because of its contents, but because it knows you've seen it all. And now, it's wondering what you're going to do about that. There's no going back to the beginning. You've touched feathers, read secrets scorched in ash, held stones that sang and bones that whispered, and in the deepest part of this relic, you met something like a name, your name, or one that used to be yours. And now the pouch doesn't want to be open anymore. It wants to be worn. You thread the old cord through your belt, cinch it close to your hip, and feel a strange surge in your legs, like you're standing straighter, grounded harder. This is what the druid felt, probably. The moment when the tools stop being external. When they shift from being part of your pouch to being part of you. The clearing around you is silent. Not empty. Just listening. You crouch, press your palm into the soil. Not dramatically. Just long enough to say thank you. Because you know what you've really been carrying all this time? Not moss or teeth or fire-stained parchment. You've been carrying intention. The deliberate act of giving meaning to the physical. And the weight of that, it's beautiful. And a little exhausting. You stand, sling the pouch against your side. It thumps once, softly. Like a heart. Like it's alive again. And you start to walk, not away, not back, but forward. The forest doesn't stop you. The moss welcomes you. A crow calls once, lazily, from a crooked birch, and for the first time all night, you don't flinch. You understand. You know what the druid carried. And you know what you carry now. Knowledge. Mystery. Choice. The pouch may have belonged to someone else, but now it's yours, too. Not the literal contents, no. You're not walking out of here with a pocket full of ancient detritus and a magical rodent tooth. What you're leaving with is the understanding that every object matters, if you decide it does. Every small thing, feather, pebble, scent, memory, is a world. And when you put those things together with purpose, you make meaning. That's what the druid knew. That's what the pouch was. A portable spell. A worldview made wearable. And now that spell lives in you. You leave the glade in silence, the pouch swaying lightly against your hip, the forest folding itself behind you like a page turning back into a book. You don't have to look back. The druid isn't behind you. The druid is in you. And the last thing you feel, just as the stars reappear between branches overhead, is a pulse from the pouch. One beat. One breath. One wordless promise. I remember. You walk until the forest thins and the sky opens wide, stars scattered above like someone cracked open a pouch of their own and spilled the heavens. The weight on your hip is familiar now. It doesn't drag. It anchors. You know everything inside it, and yet, it still holds more than you can name. Because what it really holds is space. Space for meaning. Space for choice. Space for you. You slow your steps, sensing that this moment, this long, winding ritual, is almost done. You reach into the pouch one final time, not because you expect to find anything new, but because this has become the gesture, the rhythm, the quiet reassurance. Your fingers brush wool, resin, maybe a shard of bone. You know them all now. You could name them, but you don't. This isn't about labeling. It's about listening. And the pouch doesn't speak in words. It speaks in memories. In symbols. In trust. You settle to the ground, legs crossed, the pouch resting in your lap like a sleeping pet. The air is cooler now. The scent of crushed leaves rises with your breath. You're not in that druid's world. But you've touched it. You've tasted it. And it's changed you. The night has held you gently all this time, and now it's folding its arms around you in a different way, softer, slower, more like a goodbye. Or maybe a good night. You press your hand to the pouch one last time. It's warm again. Always, at the end, it's warm. Like a held hand. Like a fire's edge. Like knowing something ancient has seen you and didn't look away. You've journeyed through feathers and flame, bones and breath, song and silence. And at the heart of it all? Not a spell. Not a secret. Just presence. The druid didn't carry power. They carried awareness. They noticed. They remembered. And so will you. You close your eyes. The pouch is still. The forest breathes around you. And somewhere, just beneath the soil, the old rhythms keep humming. Let yourself breathe a little deeper now. Not to fill your lungs, but to let something out. The journey you've just taken hasn't been loud or fast or flashy. It's been slow, quiet, curious. A different kind of magic. One made of noticing. You're not in the forest anymore. Not really. But maybe your body still remembers the smell of moss, the hush of feathers brushing skin, the way a bell can ring without a sound. That's okay. Let that stay with you. That's the part you get to keep. You don't need to understand every object you found. You don't need to memorize every herb, every scrap of bone, every mark etched into antler or bark. That wasn't the point. The point was attention. Connection. Story. The druid's pouch was never about what you could pull from it. It was about what it revealed in you. So tonight, as your breath softens and the air grows heavier around you, let those stories wrap around you. Let the weight of old symbols press gently against your thoughts. You're not carrying a leather pouch full of relics. You're carrying stillness, wonder, maybe a little awe. And that's more than enough. Sleep comes now, slow and sure. Like mist creeping between tree roots. Like stars fading behind dawn. You are safe. You are still. You are remembered. Sweet dreams.